Okay, I want to start on chapter 18, which actually is one of my favorite chapters. I'm going to be talking about some men who were my childhood heroes. Particularly, we start off with Copernicus, go from him to Kepler. Now, if any of you know anything at all about the science in this period, they skip a very important one. The book skips him, so I'll skip him. A man named Tycho. Anyway, Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton. Four men, and all four of them dealt with the science that was to lead the way in changing Europeans' way of thinking about themselves and the universe. That science is the science of astronomy. And until about the year 1800 or so, astronomy was the most developed science that there was. Why astronomy? Simply this: our changing view of astronomy changed our way that we looked at ourselves in the universe. Before Copernicus, or before Copernicus' ideas were accepted, men looked on themselves as being the earth at the center of the universe, and the earth was the crown of the universe, and all of the universe went around the earth because the earth was at the center. The sun went around the earth every day, the moon went around the earth every day, and the planets went around the earth. Well, some Greek astronomers way back there 2,000 years before had tried to tell mankind, no, the earth actually goes around the sun, and so do the planets. The planets also go around the sun. Nobody believed them. Instead, they adopted Ptolemy's view. Don't worry about the name Ptolemy, but they adopted the view that the earth was the center of the universe. This is called the geocentric. Copernicus replaced it with a heliocentric view. That the sun was the center of the universe, and that the earth goes around the sun. And he pictured a universe that had the sun at the center, and first off was Mercury, then Venus, and then Earth, followed by Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They only knew about the planet Saturn. They didn't know anything about the planets Uranus, Neptune, on out.
Which one you said?
This is Copernicus. Copernicus said, he put forth that, I hope I'm not going to, he put forth the heliocentric. Helio means sun, geo means earth. The heliocentric view of the universe, that the sun was the center of the universe. Now, the moon, he has said, yeah, the moon does go around the earth. But other than that, the other planets all go around the sun, with Mercury and Venus being closer, and Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn being farther away. Now, in contrast, we today believe that the sun is not the center of the universe. I'm going to get back to that in a minute as to just what is. But instead, the sun goes around the galaxy, and then there are millions upon millions, actually billions of other galaxies that all have stars by the millions rotating around them. That our sun is one of multiplied billions of stars that go around our Milky Way galaxy. Copernicus did not envision that. Of course, Copernicus lived before the invention of the telescope. Now, Copernicus was afraid to publish his book, and in fact, as he was dying, he laid the book on his chest, and he said, wait until I'm gone, then publish my book. He published his book on his deathbed because he was afraid that the church would oppose him, which the church initially did. The next one, these heroes, is Kepler. Kepler, Kepler studied the astronomy, he studied the stars for some 20 years, and he also had the records of Tycho. Somehow Tycho had given him, even though Tycho was of noble birth and Kepler was not, but Tycho had turned over to him his observatory. And after 20 years of study, Kepler came to the conclusion that, I don't know what happened there, that the planets move in elliptical orbits. Now, this machine can draw an ellipse better than I can, so that's why I used it. Now, basically, an ellipse may look to you like an egg, but the difference between an egg shape and an ellipse is an egg tends to be flatter on one side than it is the other. An ellipse is like a circle except it's elongated and has two focal points. Oops, I better not use this marker here or there'll be a mess. Anyway, a focal point, Kepler not only said the planets move in elliptical orbits, but that the sun is at one of the focal points. And he said, he actually gave forth 3 laws of motion, but I'm only going to describe 2. The third one is somewhat complex. Of the 3 laws, he said when a planet is closest to the sun, it moves faster than it does as the planet gets farther away from the sun and moves slower and slower. And then as it gets closer in, it starts moving faster again. This phenomenon explained something that we had not been able to explain before, particularly in regards to Mars, why the planet Mars seems to move along in the sky, stop and back up before continuing on its path. Now, I'm sure every one of you have experienced this. You're stopped at a stop sign or a red light, and all of a sudden your car starts inexplicably rolling backwards. And no matter how hard you hit the brakes, you can't stop your car from rolling backwards. But then you realize, no, your car is not rolling, it's the car beside you is rolling forward. You were watching the car beside you move forward, and you thought you were moving backwards and going to hit the car behind you. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Or maybe vice versa. You've heard that your car starts seeming to roll forward, but it's because the car beside you is rolling backwards, and you think you're moving forward when you're not. Essentially, what is happening? The Earth's orbit around the sun is nearly circular, which means it keeps a constant speed going around the sun. Mars's orbit is more elliptical, which means that Mars slows down when it gets farther from the Earth. Therefore, if you're observing the Earth, if you're observing Mars from the Earth, there will be a time when Mars will seem to stop still and back up in the sky. It's not that Mars is actually backing up in its orbit, it's just that Mars is slowing down in its orbit because it's actually slowing down because it's the Earth's speed is constant, Mars's speed varies. Some planets' orbit is more elliptical than others. Mercury is very elliptical, Mars is quite elliptical, Venus fairly nearly circular, Earth circular, Moon almost circular, Mars elliptical, Jupiter, they're all elliptical to some degree. The most elliptical bodies we know of are comets. Halley's Comet is very, very, very extremely elliptical. It might look, well, it might look something like this if you could see it, a diagram. Very elongated orbit with, when it gets close to the sun, it's moving fast, and when it doesn't, it moves much more slowly. Pluto's orbit is also elliptical. I know some are going to say, you've heard that Pluto is not considered a planet anymore. It's still there. That may not be a planet, but it's considered such, but it's still there. A lot of the asteroids have very, very elliptical orbits. All right. Anyway, Kepler's ideas paved the way for Newton. Unlike Copernicus, Kepler had no fear of reprisals from the church. In fact, Kepler explained what Copernicus could not explain, why the orbit of Mars backed up. I'm going to insert a little personal aside here about Kepler. During the time Kepler was famous, his mother began to have problems being accused of witchcraft. Now, depending on your worldview, if any woman was a witch, his mother probably was. Kepler used his influence to keep her out of court as long as he could, but finally the judge just got fed up with hearing reports about it, and the judge ordered her to appear in court. And just shortly before she was scheduled to appear in court, she had the good fortune of dying. I had people say probably Kepler killed her. I very much doubt that, but maybe it was her old age plus the strain of going to court where she had no chance at all of winning a witchcraft case. Again, the evidence was highly stacked against her. Again, just a kind of a personal note to realize these men did have personal lives also with the problems that any one of us might have had if we lived at the time. All right. Moving on from Kepler to the next one, Galileo. All right. Galileo is remembered as being the first man that we know of to point a telescope to heavens. No, he did not invent a telescope. The telescope had been invented by a Dutch man named Lippershey. But when Galileo heard about it, he got some glass and ground his own lenses and put a telescope together. Now, hey, as a young kid, I used to do the same thing. I have some magnifying glasses. I put one end to end and make a telescope. And in fact, I still have a telescope at the house, but it's getting really old and its adjustment knobs are kind of almost frozen stuck. And I don't know what it is. It's now called vintage. It's outlived its usefulness. But it will show some of the same things that Galileo saw. And Galileo pointed his telescope to heavens. By today's standards, it was a crude telescope. But he began to see things that had not been seen before. He first man to see the craters on the moon. He named the features he saw. He named some mountains, and the names he gave were still used. He called the black areas he saw on the moon seas. Today we know they aren't, but the Sea of Tranquility was where the first astronauts who landed on a Sea of Tranquility. The name was given by Galileo. In addition, he discovered that Jupiter had 4 moons, and their names that he gave them still stuck. Their names are Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Don't worry about the names, but he discovered 4 moons of Jupiter. He saw the rings of Saturn, but he could not identify them as such. His telescope just was not good enough to resolve that these rings were rings. He noticed that Venus has phases like the moon. We seldom see a full Venus because a full Venus would be on the opposite side of the sun from the Earth. But when we see Venus, it's usually showing phases similar to the moon. And he discovered the Milky Way. In the Milky Way, it looks like a pathway in the sky. And a lot of the ancients said it was the path between earth and heaven. He said the Milky Way was composed of billions upon billions of individual stars. Made numerous discoveries.